Most people think aging is just time passing, but science reveals something far more shocking and controllable than that. Your body is not slowly breaking down because of age, it is breaking down because of how you live daily. Deep inside your cells, there are biological systems designed to repair, renew, and rebuild everything that gets damaged over time. But those systems have one requirement that modern life has almost completely destroyed, and most people never even realize it. That requirement is silence. Biological silence, the kind that only happens when you stop putting food into your body temporarily. Every single time you eat, even a small snack, your body receives a powerful hormonal signal that says, "Build and store." That signal is driven by insulin, and insulin is not bad, but when it never drops, everything starts falling apart silently. Your cells become locked in a permanent construction mode, always building, always storing, but never cleaning, never repairing, never renewing themselves. Imagine a factory that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with zero time scheduled for maintenance or repair. At first, everything looks fine. Production is happening. Things are moving. But deep inside, errors are quietly accumulating without anyone noticing. Broken parts keep running. Damaged components stay in place. And slowly, the entire system becomes less efficient with every passing day. This is exactly what happens inside your body when you eat constantly without ever giving your biology a real, intentional pause. Misfolded proteins pile up inside cells, damaged mitochondria keep producing less energy, and low-grade inflammation spreads like a slow, invisible fire. And here is the part that changes everything. None of this is actually caused by time. It is caused by operation. The way you operate your body every single day determines how fast or how slowly your biological age truly advances inside. This means aging is not entirely fixed or inevitable. It is largely a consequence of never allowing your body to repair itself. And the moment you understand this, one simple practice starts to look less like a diet and more like a biological necessity. That practice is intermittent fasting, not because it burns calories, but because it gives your cells the silence they desperately need to heal. When most people start fasting for the first time, they experience headaches, irritability, brain fog, and an overwhelming urge to immediately eat. Most people interpret those feelings as proof that fasting is dangerous or that their body is shutting down and needs food urgently. But those feelings are not hunger, they are confusion, the biological confusion of a system that has forgotten how to switch fuels. Your body has been running on glucose for so long that it has almost completely lost the ability to burn fat efficiently. Scientists call this metabolic inflexibility, and it is not rare or unusual. It is the default state of almost every modern human. When glucose runs low after hours without food, the body should smoothly transition to burning stored fat as its primary energy source. But because that fat-burning pathway has been neglected for years, the switch is slow, clumsy, and it feels deeply uncomfortable at first. Think of glucose as the refrigerator right in your kitchen, always within reach, always easy, always the first place your body looks. And think of body fat as a massive, deep freezer in the basement, packed with enough energy to fuel you for weeks. The problem is not that the fuel is gone. The problem is that your body has completely forgotten where the key is. So when the refrigerator empties and fasting begins, instead of calmly going downstairs, the body panics and stress hormones begin to rise. But if you understand what is actually happening, you can move through that confusion phase without fear and reach something extraordinary on the other side.
Because around 12 to 18 hours after your last meal, something quietly remarkable begins to happen deep inside your biological system silently. Glycogen, the stored glucose in your liver, finally runs out, and insulin, the growth hormone, drops to its lowest point of the day. That drop is not just a number on a lab test, It is a biological unlock that opens the door to deep repair. The body stops storing and starts accessing. Fat reserves open up, and the liver begins converting fatty acids into something called ketones. Ketones are not just a backup fuel, they are a specialized energy source that crosses the blood-brain barrier and feeds your brain directly. And here's what surprises almost everyone. The brain does not just tolerate ketones, it actually performs significantly better when fueled by them. Glucose creates energy spikes and crashes, requires insulin to function, and produces inflammatory byproducts that cloud thinking and reduce overall mental clarity. Ketones burn cleanly, steadily, and efficiently, producing far fewer inflammatory signals and delivering a quality of mental energy that glucose simply cannot match. This is why people who push through the early confusion phase of fasting report something they never expected, a deep and effortless mental clarity. Not the jittery alertness of caffeine, not a stimulant spike, but a calm, stable, sustained focus that feels completely different from normal energy. This is not imagination, this is evolutionary biology. Because for most of human history, food was not available every few hours constantly. Scarcity was normal, and during scarcity, the human brain needed to become sharper, not weaker, in order to find food and survive. So biology wired your nervous system to upgrade during fasting, not deteriorate, because a foggy brain during scarcity would have meant certain death. The discomfort you feel early in fasting is not a warning sign telling you to stop. It is a reactivation signal telling you to continue. But ketones and fat burning are only the beginning of what happens when your body finally enters this fasted biological state deeply. Because around the same time that ketones begin rising, another process quietly activates inside your cells, one that won a Nobel Prize in 2016. That process is called autophagy, and it is the most important anti-aging mechanism that most people have never heard of in their lives. Autophagy is the cell's internal cleaning and recycling system, and it is one of the most precisely engineered biological processes ever discovered by science. When growth signals finally go silent and fasting continues long enough, cells begin conducting a detailed internal scan of everything they contain inside. They identify misfolded proteins, once functional molecules that have twisted into shapes that now disrupt normal cellular communication and overall biological performance. They locate aging mitochondria, the energy engines of the cell, that have become so damaged they produce more harm than actual usable energy. They gather years of accumulated cellular debris, waste products that have been quietly sitting inside your cells, slowly poisoning their function from within. And then, instead of simply discarding all of this damaged material, the cell does something even more remarkable and efficient than just cleaning itself. It breaks those damaged components down into raw biological materials and uses them to build newer, cleaner, and more efficient cellular structures from scratch. This is why autophagy is not just a stress response, it is the foundational anti-aging mechanism your body was designed to use regularly. Think of it like an office building after all the employees go home, and the phones go quiet, and the building finally empties out. During the day, when everything is loud and busy, the maintenance crew cannot enter, cannot clean, cannot fix anything that is broken down. But when the building empties and silence returns, the crew finally enters, inspects every corner, replaces worn components, and restores the entire system beautifully. Eating keeps your biological building full and loud around the clock, and the maintenance crew never gets the signal that it is safe to enter. Fasting empties the building, drops the noise, and gives your internal maintenance crew the silence they need to do their most important work. This is the truth most people completely miss when they think about fasting. It is not about eating less, it is about pausing purposefully. Autophagy cannot be triggered by eating less at each meal. It requires an actual absence of eating long enough for growth signals to fully fall. And when it does activate consistently over months and years, the biological effects are measurable, profound, and deeply connected to how fast you age. Long-term practitioners of intermittent fasting show markers of younger biological age, healthier mitochondria, more stable cellular function, and significantly lower systemic inflammation throughout. But there is another layer to fasting that most people never consider, and it is rooted in one of biology's most elegant and powerful principles. That principle is called hormesis, and it completely changes how you should think about stress, discomfort, and what it actually means to be resilient. Hormesis describes a specific biological phenomenon where a small, controlled dose of stress does not weaken the body, but actually makes it significantly stronger. You already know this principle from exercise. When you lift weights, you create microscopic tears in muscle fibers, and that damage triggers rebuilding and growth. Without the stress of resistance, muscles never receive the signal to grow, and without that signal, they gradually weaken and shrink over time, slowly. Fasting operates on exactly the same principle, but instead of training muscles, it trains every single cell in your entire biological system simultaneously. When food is temporarily absent, cells receive a clear signal that resources are limited and that they must become more efficient to survive this period. Under that mild biological pressure, protective pathways activate that would never turn on during a state of constant abundance and easy energy availability. Cells increase production of stress response proteins, enhance their DNA repair mechanisms, improve the quality of their mitochondria, and strengthen their internal antioxidant defenses. These adaptations do not emerge from comfort. They emerge specifically from challenge, and they are the biological foundation of long-term resilience and vitality. The key distinction with hormesis is dosage. Too much stress causes breakdown, but the right amount of stress triggers adaptation and makes systems more robust. Intermittent fasting, practiced within reasonable boundaries, delivers exactly the right amount of biological stress to trigger adaptation without crossing into damage or true deprivation. And with every cycle of mild stress followed by recovery, your body's threshold for resilience rises slightly, building biological strength that compounds over time. Now here is the fear that stops most people from ever trying fasting seriously: the deep worry that they will lose all their muscle. It sounds completely logical on the surface. If you are not eating protein constantly, surely your body will start consuming your muscle for fuel. But when you examine this fear through the lens of actual evolutionary biology, it collapses almost immediately under the weight and biological evidence. Ask yourself one simple question. If short-term fasting caused rapid muscle loss, how did any human ancestor ever survive a single day without food? For most of human history, meals were separated by many hours or even full days, and muscle was the most critical survival asset available.
It was the tissue that allowed early humans to hunt, to run, to climb, to fight, and to protect themselves and their families. Biology would never allow a survival mechanism to cannibalize the very tissue needed for survival, and it does not. The science is extremely clear on this. When fasting begins, one of the first major hormonal events is a dramatic surge in human growth hormone, sometimes rising by 300 to 500%. Human growth hormone is not a bulking hormone. Its primary job is to protect lean tissue and prevent muscle breakdown during periods of low food intake. At the same time, the body shifts its fuel preference entirely towards stored body fat, the abundant energy reserve that exists specifically to be used during scarcity. Muscle loss only becomes a real concern under prolonged extreme starvation, combined with severe protein deficiency, chronic stress, and a complete absence of physical movement.
Intermittent fasting is none of those things. It is a temporary and intentional pause, and the body responds to it with protection, not self-destruction. The single most important thing you can do alongside fasting to preserve and even improve muscle quality is to apply mechanical stress through resistance training. When your muscles receive the signal that they are being used and are actively needed, the body receives a clear instruction to keep them intact. Paired with the protective hormonal environment that fasting creates, resistance training ensures that what you lose is fat and what you keep is function. Most people who practice intermittent fasting alongside regular movement do not feel weaker over time. They feel leaner, more stable, and more physically capable. The fear of muscle loss is really a confusion between fasting and malnutrition, and these two states are biologically and physiologically completely different from each other. Fasting is a temporary, intentional absence of intake that triggers adaptation and protection. Malnutrition is a chronic deprivation that causes genuine breakdown and deterioration. Understanding that distinction transforms one of the biggest fears about fasting into one of the most powerful reasons to actually practice it with confidence. Now let us talk about the change that surprises people most, not the physical transformation, but what happens to the way your mind actually works. People who fast regularly describe something that is difficult to fully explain until you experience it personally, a quality of thinking that feels fundamentally different. Sharper, quieter, more focused, less distracted, more present and capable of sustained concentration without the usual crashes, cravings, or mental fog interfering throughout the day. This experience is not psychological or placebo. It is driven by measurable neurochemical changes that begin the moment ketones start fueling your brain consistently. At the center of these changes is a protein called BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, which neuroscientists sometimes describe simply as fertilizer for your brain. BDNF does not just help existing neurons survive, it actively stimulates the growth of new neurons and strengthens the connections between them over time. It increases neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to reorganize itself, adapt to new information, retain memories more effectively, and recover from cognitive stress. When fasting continues long enough and ketones become a primary fuel source, BDNF levels rise significantly in direct response to the fasting state. This is not a coincidence or a side effect, it is an evolutionary design feature that links periods of food scarcity directly to cognitive enhancement. During early human history, scarcity demanded sharp thinking, accurate observation, fast decision-making, and precise risk assessment to successfully find food and survive. A brain that became foggy or slow during food absence would have been a fatal liability, so biology wired it to do the opposite. When you fast, you are not depriving your brain, you are activating the exact neurological conditions that your brain evolved to perform best under. The mental clarity most people experience while fasting is not imagination or discipline, it is BDNF rising and a nervous system finally running as designed. Over the long term, consistently elevated BDNF has profound implications far beyond daily focus and productivity in your immediate life and work performance. Declining BDNF is one of the strongest biological predictors of memory loss, depression, accelerated cognitive decline, and increased risk of neurodegenerative diseases later in life. By regularly activating BDNF through fasting, you are not just improving how you think today, you are protecting the health of your brain for decades. And there is one more dimension to fasting's effect on aging that operates beneath all of these mechanisms and ties everything together powerfully and completely. It is the reduction of chronic low-grade inflammation, the silent biological force that modern science now recognizes as the root driver of nearly every major disease. Chronic inflammation does not announce itself with obvious pain or sudden symptoms. It spreads quietly through tissues, disrupting cellular communication and draining metabolic resources slowly. It underlies cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune conditions, cognitive decline, joint deterioration, skin aging, in the persistent fatigue that so many people accept as normal. And a significant portion of this inflammation originates not from external sources, but from the digestive system being constantly stimulated without adequate rest or recovery time. Every meal triggers intestinal contractions, enzyme production, immune signaling, and microbiome interaction. And when this process never stops, the gut lining becomes chronically irritated over time. Since the majority of your immune system lives in and around your gut, persistent irritation keeps immunity in a constant state of unnecessary and exhausting activation. That perpetual immune activation generates inflammatory signals that travel throughout the entire body, contributing to tissue damage, hormonal disruption, and accelerated biological aging everywhere. When fasting begins, one of the first and most immediate benefits is that the digestive system finally gets the rest it has been desperately needing. Motility slows, enzyme production decreases, immune activity shifts from constant reaction to focused repair, and the intestinal barrier begins strengthening its integrity from within. As gut inflammation decreases, the benefits radiate outward in ways that most people find genuinely surprising and far more noticeable than they expected initially. Skin becomes clearer and calmer, joint stiffness eases, persistent bloating resolves, and a general sense of physical lightness and internal cleanliness begins to emerge naturally. These are not cosmetic effects or superficial improvements. They are direct signs that baseline inflammatory signaling throughout your entire body is measurably and meaningfully decreasing. Lower inflammation means more energy available for repair rather than defense, cleaner cellular communication, more stable hormonal function, and a body that simply works better overall. This is why long-term fasters so often describe feeling younger from the inside, not because symptoms are masked, but because a root cause is addressed. And when you bring all of these mechanisms together, autophagy, ketones, BDNF, hormesis, inflammation reduction, you start to see a picture that goes far beyond weight loss. You start to see a fundamental shift in the way your biology operates, a shift from constant accumulation toward active renewal, from decline toward genuine regeneration.
Modern medicine has become extraordinarily good at extending lifespan, at keeping bodies alive through intervention, medication, and management of disease and dysfunction over time. But extending lifespan without extending health span is not a victory. It is a prolonged deterioration that robs people of quality, independence, and genuine vitality. Health span is the number of years you remain mentally sharp, physically capable, emotionally engaged, and genuinely independent without requiring constant medical management or assistance. The goal is not to exist at 85. The goal is to remain clear-minded, physically strong, and deeply engaged with life at 85. Intermittent fasting, practiced consistently and intelligently over the long term, is one of the most powerful tools available for expanding health span, rather than just lifespan. Not because it is magic, but because it works directly with the biological systems your body already has, systems designed for exactly this kind of repair. The body has never lost its ability to renew itself. It has simply been trapped in an operational mode that conflicts with its original evolutionary design. Every intentional pause you give your body is not deprivation, it is permission. Permission for biology to do the work it was always meant to do. You do not need to change everything overnight. You do not need a perfect protocol or a rigid schedule or an extreme approach to begin experiencing this. You simply need to understand that biological silence is not empty. It is full of the most important work your body will ever do for you. The question is not whether your body can repair itself. The evidence is clear that it absolutely can. The question is whether you will let it. Every hour you give your biology to work without interruption is an investment, not in staying young forever, but in aging with strength, clarity, and purpose. That is not a promise from a trend.
That is what hundreds of millions of years of biological evolution designed your body to do naturally. And now that you understand the real science behind what happens when you stop eating temporarily, that knowledge itself becomes one of the most powerful tools available to you.